Only one can take the man. Gentle guide, loving guardian, heal our foolish ways. We long to forsake the advice of the wicked and the slow seduction of sinful paths, but our speech and actions often belie us. We yearn to be like trees planted beside living waters, bearing the fruit of righteousness in due season. But the seed of scoffers calls to us, and the temptation to return evil for evil withers our souls like shrubs in the desert. Our hearts seek the ways of your Spirit and the waters of life, but our footsteps lead us into arid desert sands. This is not your hope and plan for us. Forgive us. Turn us again to the healing we so freely offer, and mend the brokenness in our lives and in our world. Amen. God looks at us in our brokenness and offers blessings to all who turn to the Lord. With the assurance of God's faithful love, choose this day to be people of blessing. Those who place their faith in the Lord are blessed. Let us share this blessing with those around us as we pass the peace of Christ.
Hear us, God, for we are praying. Hear us, God, for we are happy in our joy. Hear us, God, for we are crying out to you, wondering what will be, what will be. Speak to us, God, for we are listening. Speak to us, God, for we are waiting for your
screen it says the Wilson class meets at 9:45.
I've been told the same.
But we've recognized in the Wilson class that when the time for second mile change, it became difficult for our class members and any prospective class members to make it to our class. So starting today, believe it or not, the Wilson class will begin meeting at 10 o'clock. So please, so please come down to the crib and join us. If you've never been, I think you'll find that it's a great class, even though the class president leaves a lot to be desired. We've got a great rotation of weekly teachers. We have special guest speakers that come in. But if you're looking for a class that offers faith, fellowship, and fun, come down and join us.
Now the children will come up for time to do.
Captain, can I make one more announcement?
Sure.
Terry Morris, I'm getting ready to put you on the spot, so be ready. We are planning the Appalachian Service Project again, and the trip dates are June 16th through the 22nd. It's a Sunday through a Saturday. And we are in the middle of sign-up. Registration is going on. I'm going to meet with Lexi this week because we're trying to figure out a way that we can kind of do that online versus people having to come up here and drop off a check. But it's filling up quickly. And we are again partnering with Holy Trinity, and they've already taken up 8 spaces. So if you or your children are interested in going, it is for rising 9th graders through 12th graders, but we are open to having as many adults as want to go, as long as we have space. I do need maybe 1 or 2 more women that might want to be chaperones this year. So if you know someone or if your heart is being touched to maybe go with our youth on this trip, that would be really great. One thing that we have planned, and this is where Terry's going to come in, but next Saturday, we have a group that's going to be working over here on the new chicken coop. And Terry, did you want to give some specifics about that?
Well, as you know, we tried to do some practice sessions before we go to AST to give the new people or current people a chance to work with hand tools and see actually how we work together to build things. And one of those is building the chicken coop. We were asked, along with the Friendship House, to partner with them to help build that chicken coop. So between 8 and 4 next Saturday, you can come at your leisure, help for a couple hours, you can help all day. Lunch will be served. It's my understanding that we're going to be making pizzas in the pizza oven in the pavilion. So just come, bring some tools. If not, I've got tools and some safety equipment. So you can contact the church or contact me. I left my email address with the church staff. Thanks.
Okay, I'll have a few more announcements too, because here we go. So number 1, on your table, this Wednesday night is skate night. Highland has rented out the whole skating rink, so this is an event for everyone. If you want a good time, come see me on skate, so I'm telling you. Number 2, March 20th, this is also an event for our pre-K through 12th graders. We are going to have our first annual HBC talent show. So this is what I'm telling you. If you guys don't show up, I will sing, I will dance, I will do whatever for an hour of entertainment. So you guys better sign your ass up or we're in trouble. And last but not least, you tonight, 5 to 6:30, please show up. We have lots of fun planned for you. So, you guys ready? And any kids hiding back, if you don't come up, Dad, we'll get treats. So just let you know. Adults, if you want to come running too, it's all right. Well, good morning, friends. No. Good morning, friends. Good morning. What holiday did you celebrate last Thursday at school? Valentine's Day, right? And what did you guys do at school on Valentine's Day? Did you exchange cards? Did you have a party? Did you eat lots of sugar? Because that's exactly what happened at my house. You got lots of sugar? You didn't? Well, I'll make sure I give you some sugar before you leave today, okay? I got some right here for you. So, what you guys did on Valentine's Day is you shared with your friends the love that you had for them. And what I'm going to talk with you about this morning is, who loves you the most? God. Boom. I know your parents are way high up right behind you. You guys got lucky this morning. There's a symbol that God gave for us right behind you to let you know how much He loves you. Do you see it? Ooh, you look right at it. Turn around right behind you. What's that thing called? The cross, right? God gave us that symbol of the cross, and we see it everywhere. I was looking around this week, and I saw it when I was looking at telephone wires, or when I look at fence posts outside. The cross is everywhere, and that is God's Valentine to you every single day of the year, because He's telling you how much He loves you. He sent His Son to die and what for you? The cross, right? That is like the best Valentine's gift that you could ever get. So whenever you see that cross, I want you to remember how much God loves you. He's there for you during the good times. He's there for you during the bad times. But He is the best Valentine that you guys could ever ask for. So where can you read about God and the great things He's done? Lulu, you are like A+ today. The Bible, right? Check out this Bible I brought for you today. Ready? Is this a normal Bible? Because watch what happens when I open it. What's inside? Yeah, right, there's candy inside. Let me tell you what it says. It says, Holy Bible, it's winking at you. And then it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was God. And it's full of cross candies. So as you guys leave this morning, this is your reminder to take with you about the best Valentine ever. Who was it again? God. You can even have more than one, and you look at half of them are sitting out there today. So, before we leave, let's have a little prayer. And remember this week, as you're going around town, look for that cross symbol and just see where you can find it. So, dear Lord, thank you so much for sending Jesus to save us. Whenever we see a cross, help us to remember your great love. Amen.
God has blessed us with lives that bear much fruit. Let us share the blessings we have received from God with those in need as we collect today's offering.
Jesus, I will never let you go.
have borne in due season, we return these gifts to you. Bless them with your manifold grace and multiply them in your mercy, that they may go forth to heal a world trapped in loneliness and isolation. In the name of the one who leads us into life, we pray. Amen.
So this morning we come, we're in week 18 of the story, which is a long way. And we find ourselves in the book of Daniel, Daniel chapter 4. And I'm just reading selections. I'm reading 18 verses. There's a whole other 20 verses that I decided not to read because, John Wilson moved their class time back. We don't want to make us still wait for it. So, but I encourage you, maybe at some point you're able to go back and read all of Daniel 4, and it gives you a fuller picture of what's going on here. But hopefully from the sections that you're going to get here, 1 through 8, 28 through 37, you'll get an idea of what's going on. So here now God's word for us this day. One day King Nebuchadnezzar sent out a herald with a message for all the peoples, nations, and languages of the earth. The message said, "May peace and prosperity be yours. I am pleased to be able to tell you about all the signs and miracles the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs! How powerful are his miracles! His kingdom will endure forever. His reign will last from generation to generation. I, King Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace. Things were going well, and I was prospering. Then one night, I had a dream that terrified me. As I rested that night on my bed, the images in my mind, the visions in my head, disturbed me greatly, and I could not shake the fear. So I ordered my servants to gather all the wise men of Babylon and bring them before me in order to tell me what this dream might mean. So they came, magicians, enchanters, Chaldean astrologers, and diviners. And though I told them the dream, they could not tell me its meaning. Finally, Daniel came before me. This man had been given the Babylonian name Belteshazzar after the name of my own god, Bel, and it certainly seemed the spirit of the holy gods is with him. I told him my dream. And then we're going to skip ahead. If you want all the details of the dream, you have to read it yourself. But we're skipping ahead to verse 28. But King Nebuchadnezzar forgot Daniel's advice. So everything Daniel had predicted happened. 12 months later, as the king was strolling across the roof of his royal palace in Babylon, the king uttered foolish words, saying, "Isn't Babylon a great city? I have built this royal residence from the ground up with my own might and my own ingenuity to honor my own majesty." The words had scarcely left his lips when another voice thundered from the heaven. The voice from heaven said, "King Nebuchadnezzar, these solemn words are for you. The kingdom has been taken away from you. You will be driven away from all that is human. You will live in the company of wild animals. You will be forced to eat grass like oxen. 7 times will pass until you learn your lesson and acknowledge that it is the Most High God and no other who is the true sovereign over all the kingdoms on earth. He grants authority to anyone he wishes." Instantly, the heavenly decree against Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from all that is human and began to eat grass as the oxen do. The dew of heaven fell and drenched his body. In time, his hair grew as long as the feathers on an eagle, and his nails grew long and curved back on his hand, like the claws of a bird. The message from King Nebuchadnezzar continued. "When these days of exile came to an end, I, Nebuchadnezzar, looked up toward heaven and came to my senses. I blessed the Most High God and praised and gave glory to the one who lives eternally. His reign will endure forever. His kingdom will last from generation to generation. Among all the people on the earth, there are none who compare. He does as he wishes, and with the armies of heaven and those who live on earth. No one can stop his hand from acting. No one dares to ask, what have you done? It was in that moment that I came to my senses. Soon my honor and splendor were restored as Daniel predicted, and the former glory of my kingdom returned. Those who had served me before, my advisors and officials, sought me and returned me to the throne of Babylon. In time my kingdom and power grew even greater than it was before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, acknowledge the true King of heaven. I praise, lift up, and glorify him, because all he does is true. All his ways are just, and he is able to cut down those who strut about in their pride. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
We pray. God, we gather together this day to worship you, but so often we get focused on ourselves. And we get so focused on ourselves that we can barely think of anyone or anything else. Guide us this day to put you first. Help us to trust you with our lives and things both big and small. And Lord, speak through me this morning so that we might hear and understand your word. Amen. I began the reading by saying, we're in week 18 of the story, and we are, that we're going to look at, still in the time of prophets, and we're looking at Daniel, but really this week, we're not going to be focusing on Daniel. There's a lot of great stuff there. But we're instead going to be looking at the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, who was the ruler during Daniel's time. And, like the king, I think many of us often think the universe revolves around us. Now, we don't say that out loud, right? But we're smart enough to do that, but we kind of think that way. We think that really, everything is kind of all about us. We are the center of our universe. Now, different from us, King Nebuchadnezzar was an evil man and a tyrant when we meet him. He brutally killed kings and he conquered nations, and he wasn't just a conqueror, but he and the Babylonian people kind of took pleasure and pride in terrorizing the nations that they conquered as well. And so it's more than a little surprising when we get to chapter 4 of the book of Daniel and we realize, if you were paying attention, close attention to the part that was the preface there, that it's actually King Nebuchadnezzar who wrote chapter 4. And the beginning of that chapter, it sounds more like a worship song than a message from a king that fancies himself as God. And so you have to wonder what happened. How did we get from I'm the center of the universe to worship songs about God? What happened is contained in the rest of chapter 4. See, it's like a cliffhanger. But Nebuchadnezzar learns painfully the truth that there is a God and he isn't it. He tells of having this dream about a fabulous tree with plentiful fruit, and the tree is so big and the shade is so great that it serves as shelter for all the wildlife around this tree. But then, in his dream, a messenger from God comes down and calls for the tree to be cut down. So Nebuchadnezzar wakes up and he knows, he's a smart guy, he realizes this was not a good dream. This is a bad dream. Something's wrong. But he doesn't know what it means. And none of his court can tell him. He brings in all the experts and none of them know. And eventually, Daniel is called in. And Daniel's worried. You get called before the king. If you give him news he doesn't like, things could go south pretty quickly. But Nebuchadnezzar tells him not to worry because he is so convinced that if there's something bad in the dream, that it can't be about him. Because nothing bad happens to him. And that is when Daniel tells him, you are the tree. And he explains to him the dream. He says that 7 years will pass by until you acknowledge, essentially, that God is God and you aren't. Daniel says you're going to live like an animal. Life isn't going to work. Things are going to go disastrously wrong until the moment that you figure out that you aren't God. But Nebuchadnezzar thinks he is a God. And so, this kind of warning just rolls the king as a fool with ridiculous delusions of grandeur, I want us to think for a few minutes if we might have more in common with him in that thought process than we might realize. You see, for King Nebuchadnezzar, his whole motivation was his own glory. And I wonder, why are we doing the things that we're doing? Are we doing it for ourselves? Or are we doing it to turn the honor and the glory to God? Nebuchadnezzar built one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, kind of a big deal, right? And he didn't do it for any reason other than so people would be impressed, right? His majesty, his abilities. Everything he did was for his own glory. But again, what about what we do? And I don't just mean work or school. It's easy enough to think, well, you have to do those things. But why do we do other things? Why do we wear what we wear? Why do we live where we live, drive what we drive? Why do we sit with the people we sit with? I don't mean here, right? Here, sitting here, right? But, other places. Nebuchadnezzar gave all the credit for his success to himself, right? He thought it was all because he was so great. In verse 30, he says, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty. He says it's all about him. All the things that have happened, he has all this stuff because he's that good. And when good things happen to us, when good things happen through us, when we're a part of something good, where do we place the credit? How often do we take the glory that belongs to God? And we're all too comfortable letting God take the credit when things go wrong in our lives, right? Storms, earthquakes, and the like, those are acts of God. When something goes well, that's us, right? When something goes well, we want to take the credit for it. And this king, who all of a sudden isn't sounding so different than us, was all about taking credit for all of the good things. The prophet Habakkuk in chapter 1, verse 11 of the book that bears his name, talks about people like Nebuchadnezzar, people focused on themselves this way. Then they sweep past like the wind and they go on, guilty people whose own strength is their God. Is your own strength your God? These people that the prophet is talking about, they look to their own strength to help them, and they put the pieces together. They expect to be able to do everything themselves. And so, one last question. What is the purpose of your life? What is it that you spend most of your time chasing after? For Nebuchadnezzar, and I think for many of us, the thing that we are chasing after is happiness. And we're Americans, right? So that's like one of our rights. We're allowed to pursue happiness. But the great irony about that is the harder you pursue it, the more elusive it becomes. The faster you chase after it, the more quickly it runs away from you. When you make happiness your God, you are robbed of it. You find that you are hungry, and you're always hungry, you always want more, and you've always got to work a little bit harder to not quite get it. No matter how much you eat, you're never satisfied. No matter how much you have, it's never enough. One of the faces that I count on seeing every year at the mission conference that our family and a few others have gone to, we go there every summer. One of the faces I look forward and count on seeing is a young man by the name of Mikey Henshaw. And Mikey is the teenage son of a couple that I've known since we were all at the camp as high school kids ourselves. Mikey suffers from something called Prader-Willi syndrome. You probably haven't heard of it. It's a really rare disorder. There's only about 20,000 people in the world that have it. And basically, it's when there's a missing or non-working gene on one of your chromosomes. And has lots of effects, but one of them is that most individuals with Prader-Willi syndrome develop an excessive appetite, but at the same time, they don't experience the sensation of being full, right? So always hungry and never full. So no matter what, no matter how much or how often Mikey eats, he never feels full. And because of this, and for his own safety, his parents have to have padlocks on the cupboards and on the refrigerator. He can't have access to any of that stuff. He can't ever be alone with or near food because of the hunger he feels. And the hunger he feels constantly is so severe that unless someone stops him, unless he's kept away from the food, he will literally eat himself to death. So a few summers ago, I was coordinating the junior high program at the conference, and Mikey was a part of that program. And our speaker was talking about God's promise of living water, right? And how in Christ we can be fulfilled so that we'll never be thirsty again. And in the process of explaining this to the middle school students, he said something like this: in Jesus we can be full so that we are never thirsty again, so that we never have to be hungry again. And at that moment, Mikey hopped up. And he's got a host of other challenges as well. But he hopped up and he just ran screaming out of the room, hysterical. And of course, we go after him, try to calm him down, see what's going on. Because in the moment, none of us caught it. But we get out there, we get to him, and we start talking to him, and he just keeps saying, "It's not true. It's not true. I will always be hungry. I will always be hungry. I'm never, ever full." And that breaks your heart, right? But I wonder how many of us have a spiritual disorder that mimics what Mikey experiences every day. We eat and we eat and we eat, but we're never satisfied. We always want more. We always want one more, or a little bit more, or something else. We're still hungry. And that's Nebuchadnezzar's story. He tried everything and he still wasn't satisfied. They say that his palace was like 200,000 square feet or something like that. Just gigantic, right? Just crazy. He had everything you could possibly have. He created a wonderful world, and it wasn't enough. He wasn't satisfied. He kept trying to fill the hole in his life with more and more, and it was never enough. So Daniel tells the king that he must renounce his sin and do what is right, or he'll lose it all. But when the God of me is sitting on the throne of your heart, it's hard to hear that voice of warning, because that God, when we allow ourselves to sit on the thrones of our hearts, there's this whisper that comes to us, it says something like, the rules don't really apply to you. Or, you're not going to get caught. Or, you're too good for this. You deserve that stuff you're taking even though it's not really yours. You can keep living how you want, treating people how you want, and it will all be fine. Because you deserve it. There may be consequences for other people, you think, but we're too good for that. I'm too good for that. So then, in Nebuchadnezzar's dream, as we see in verse 33, that dream was fulfilled. He was driven away from people. He ate grass like the ox. His body was drenched in the dew of heaven. Walking around hairy and wet. It's gross, right? Long fingernails. And this is not a good image. But then, notice how quickly this happens. Then, in the very next verse, it says, Nebuchadnezzar raised his eyes to heaven, and his sanity was restored. And when his sanity was restored, he didn't go back to the way he had been living. He looked up, saw God, recognized who he was in relation to God and who God is in relation to us, and his sanity was restored. And with that knowledge, he didn't go back to living the way he had been living. He didn't go back to thinking that he was God. The moment his sanity was restored, he saw that there was a God and he wasn't him. So he repents, he humbles himself, and he begins to sing these worship songs to God that we see in the beginning of Daniel chapter 4. He begins to live not for his own glory, but for the glory of God. He recognizes that his strength is not in and of itself. It doesn't come from him, but it comes from God. The purpose of his life changes from just trying to be happy, pursuing more and more, to now telling of God's greatness for all the people of the world to hear. But it took a lot for Nebuchadnezzar to get here. It took a lot to get him off the throne of his own heart. And so my question for you and for myself this morning is, what is it going to take for you and I? What are we going to have to experience in this life to realize that we don't have to be in the pilot seat of our lives, to realize that there is one God and that none of us are Him? I remember a mission trip to Washington, D.C. It was actually with Highland about 10 years ago. And we were sitting in a church basement where they ran a prayer breakfast every morning. And this church was on the top of a hill, and it looked out over the Capitol, right? Beautiful place. And sitting there, steps from the Capitol, and several of the youth on the trip and I were enthralled by a story from one of the recipients of the breakfast, a homeless man, pretty raggedy-looking homeless man at that. He's telling these stories, and they were enthralling, right? I mean, he was sharing all about his life. He had a stint working as a roadie on tour with the Rolling Stones. I mean, this guy had seen and done some things, right? And we're hearing all about this, all this fun and excitement, and of course we're all listening, rapt attention. And then he started talking about all the things that he had lost because of one bad choice after another in his life. And then at the end, he got to the end of his story, he pulled out his Bible and he held it in his hands, and he said, I had tried things my way and it didn't work. So now I'm trying things this way, as he's holding his Bible. And I just wish it didn't take me getting here for me to put him in charge. He said it again. And for a fact, he could have been a preacher, right? I tried it my way and it didn't work. So now I'm trying it his way, but I sure wish it didn't take falling all the way to here to learn that there's a God and I'm not him. So this morning, if you are doing things your way, I have some bad news for you. It is not going to work out for you. And it may work out for a while. You may even be like King Nebuchadnezzar, get all the things you think you could possibly want. Build a pretty successful kingdom for a few years. But the time is coming when you and I, when all of us will see that we are not God, and in the end, we are not ultimately in control. The power does not belong to us. There are certain things that we can't fix on our own. There are certain pieces that we can't put back together ourselves. And now in the pride of our own hearts, we can say, I'm going to hold on to the controls no matter what. You can do that. But I don't think we'll like how it turns out. And I don't know what it will take for each of us to see that the Lord is God. But the Bible tells us that at some point every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. And so my prayer for you and for me, for all of us this morning, is that it wouldn't take some tragedy. It won't take waiting until Jesus returns. You won't have to walk around hairy, wet, and gross before you realize. But instead, that on this day, each and every one of us will realize that there is a God and we're not him. And then, instead of being deflated by that realization, we can turn our eyes to heaven and rejoice. Because the God of the universe, the God that created you, loves you. And the God that loves you is with us still. Putting back pieces that we can't make fit. Restoring brokenness that we can't help. Being hope and peace and love and grace where we don't have any for ourselves. Amen. And now we come to this table to be reminded that there are things that are broken that we can't mend ourselves. There is brokenness that is beyond our ability to heal. But the good news for us this and every day is that the table is already set. There is a place card with your name on it. You are invited to this table. You're invited to this table to receive food for the journey, to receive healing and hope, wholeness restoration that can be found only in and through our God. And it was so that we might be reconciled to God and restored into relationship with Him, that on the night that He was betrayed, Jesus took bread. And after giving thanks for it, He broke it and He handed it to His disciples, and He said to them, "Take, eat, this is my body that has been broken for you." And then, in much the same way, after supper, He took the cup. He said, "This cup is the new covenant. And as the cup that's sealed in my blood shed for you for the forgiveness of sins." And then He said to them, "As often as you eat this bread and you drink this cup, you proclaim my death until I come again." Friends, Christ, God, has prepared a feast of blessing for you and for me, for all that will come and receive. So come to the table of God, for you are the children of God.
You
We've got everything at our fingertips. Lord, remind us that we are still not God. But Lord, remind us the grace and the wonder in that truth. That you are God and that you love us. You are with us. You are with all those who suffer in mind, in body, and spirit. You are with those that are mourning and grieving. Lord, empower us through your Spirit to be the hands and feet of your body, to go out and to share your grace and love with those who harm us. We ask all of this in the name of your Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ, who taught us to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Friends, as we leave this day, leave remembering that if you are seeking after happiness, the answer is not to look inside, not to put yourself on the throne of your heart. Instead, we're invited to look up to heaven, to recognize that God is God and we are not, and rejoice in that truth, because the God of the universe goes with us, is for us, and guides us. Go from this place to love and serve the Lord. Amen.
Amen. So stand with us. In God's grace and love, we should thrive.
To know our